think we finally made it. Stuff didn't say what I wanted to do. PowerPoint doesn't do the hand of that really. I'll try and make sure I get this calendar posted online so that way everyone kind of knows what's going on. So we are here today, right? Oh, up. So we're here. Today's going to be microbes. Not much left of class. Right? Before we start on that, I want y'all to think about something. I heard someone mention earlier that they wished that they had more longer on spring break. Last year we all went on spring break. Last week, and didn't come back. Y'all remember that? And we were like, awesome, yay, 1 week we get an extra longer spring break. But we didn't come back to class until August. So just to kind of put that into perspective, that last year we were so happy that we had, and then we got hit with Corona. But remember that this year, we should be thankful to be back here. That we're not in the position that we were last year. And that we've made some progress over the course of a year. Yeah, we all hate school. I hated it too when I was a student and graduate student. It was always about getting out of class and not sitting in front of some guy or girl talking the whole time. But just to kind of put that into perspective, that last year at this time, our whole world shut down. So we should be thankful to be back in class. I know we have other stuff to do. We always want a little bit longer. But last year we were like, yay, another longer spring break, and then we didn't come back. So I'm super excited to be back because that means that we're getting back to normalcy. That means that we have something to come back for, rather than last year our whole world shutting down. Something that was on my brain this morning. All right, now that I got that out of the way, we're here. We're going to go over a little bit about microbes. Coming up on the 24th, we'll finish up this microbe, soil microbes. I believe that quiz 6 is due Wednesday. That quiz is up now. Wouldn't take it. We still have some information to go over. But it is due Wednesday the 24th. Then we're going to do soils lab. We're going to get our soil test reports back. We're going to go over some more calculations on how to interpret those and what to do with them after we've done the work for them. Calculation 3 is due on the 25th. That is up now. And you can start that. That is one of those you get multiple attempts. You can take it as much as you want to until you get the grade that you're comfortable with. I would challenge you to start taking that to see how much you have learned. It's not going to hurt anything. At least you get to kind of know what's going on. And if you have any questions, we can go over that in lab. By the time you finish the lab, you should be able to complete calculation 3. Then we have on the 27th, starting the 27th at 8 o'clock, we're going to open up for exam 3, and that will be due on the 28th at 11:30. I'm going to send out another announcement to make sure for some reason there's a group of people, not to mention any names, that seem to forget that we have an exam coming up. They always text me and go, hey, I didn't know we had an exam, but they still have some time. So I want to make sure that it's on your minds and on your brains, and we've got an exam coming up this weekend. All right? Then we're going to go over, right here we're going to start nutrient management, and that's going to get us into my realm, things that I like talking about. And it's just going to be some introduction about some things to consider on why this soil stuff is important. Because up to this point, it's just been kind of information, and what are you going to do with it? I'm going to post this to Madison, so that way everyone's got that. I'm going to start employing this in my curriculum because students like to be planners, and they like to know what they're doing and when they're doing it, and having a calendar keeps both of us accountable. So quiz 7 is going to be due on the 9th. Y'all won't be here for the 2nd. Quiz 8 is going to be on the 23rd. We're going to have an assignment in between those two, not going to be very difficult. And then we got dead week. Dead week means we're not here. You should be studying. You should be studying. We all know what that means, right? Sure.
That's the whole school.
The whole, well, I don't know about the whole school, but no one's going to make you come to class during dead week. This is an opportunity for students to catch up with what they're needing to do. If you look up, dead week means that we cannot have any quizzes. I cannot drop an assignment on you that week. We can't take the exam early. We can't take the final exam early unless there's a 100% unanimous decision that we take the exam early. That's not going to happen. So there will be, like, that Friday on the 23rd, that's going to end it. Then you'll be studying for the final, which is going to be over Module 4. There might be some other stuff from the previous modules that I feel as a soils professor or teacher, whatever, that there are some things you should still have retained over the course of the semester. Right? C. Hopkins Cafe managed by my cousin Mo Clean. Right? You should know some of these things and how to, I don't want to call it comprehensive, but I do want to put some stuff in there that we've gone over this semester so that you can look back and go, you know what, I actually did learn something, I do remember this stuff. Because you did, it's still in there. And I'd like for you to see that, and then also at the end I can go, you know what, maybe I didn't hit this enough, maybe I didn't hit that. But it ain't going to be like this super comprehensive 300 question test. Right? We'll probably have a review session somewhere in there if we need to, kind of go over some of those things. And then finally, the final exam will be online from 10:30 to 12:30. My hands are tied on that. You don't have to start at 10:30. You'll have to finish before 12:30. Make sense? And again, this will be on the video, and I'm also going to post one of these online. I actually do like this calendar system where I get to lay everything out for everyone, and they get to see it. I'm new, and I'm trying to figure out what works for you. All right, so up to this point, we've kind of talked about the soil orders. And we went over soil organic matter, and we got humic substances and fulvic substances and humus and things of that nature. But what breaks them down? So the microorganisms that are in the soil are the workers that help the nutrient cycling. Like it's not going to just cycle itself, right? We have to go out, the field isn't going to work itself. We have to go out and do something to it in order for it to happen. But we have these microorganisms in the soil that are performing these functions that help soil perform its function, which is supply nutrients to plants, basically. So one of the primary things that they do is they mix the soil. And this is kind of what if you can think back to, if you can think all the way back to the soil formation processes, I think that was module 2. The penoturbation. And so peno meaning that it's going to be these things with feet that are turning the soil, and every time an ant moves through the soil, or a worm, or some beetle, or some grub, or some bug of some sort, it is pulling a little bit of soil with it. When it pulls that soil, some falls behind it, another ant comes through, pulls that soil. So slowly but surely it was turning this thing that is incorporating those residues. They're giving off there's going to be some exudates that bugs give off, microorganisms. They have to excrete something somewhere because they are ingesting a food substance, carbon, and they're giving off some excrement that is like a oligosaccharide or a polysaccharide that is holding our soil together. It's like kind of sticky and gluey, but for soil. They are helping decompose those plant and animal residues, and when they decompose, this was kind of what we talked about last time with carbon cycling and decomposition, that when they break those residues down, there's going to be release of those nutrients. This is the nutrient cycling aspect of it, where the nitrogen or the phosphorus or the sulfur inside that plant material is released into back into the soil, changed from an organic substance to an inorganic plant available form. That is the primary purpose for decomposition. It is the mineralization of that nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, some of those other micronutrients that might be in our plant residues. They are changed from organic to inorganic. The plant takes them up as inorganic and reconverts them back to to organic. So it's a big cycle. Organic to inorganic, back to organic. Some of those microorganisms have this unique ability, not that y'all need to know so much about like which ones are which, but some of these microorganisms have the unique ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen. So if you think about this, the way that plants fix carbon dioxide, right? Because y'all have plant science, and it's a very basic concept, like a very bare minimum concept that plants take in carbon dioxide and then give off oxygen, right? Plant science at the very most basic level. So fixing carbon dioxide, giving off oxygen. These microbes do the same thing, but with atmospheric nitrogen. And we'll go over that in module 4. So they fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and supply that to the plant. We also have some bad ones in there. And so as you continue on in agronomy, for those of you that are in agronomy or some soil-related plant discipline, nematodes are bad because they eat the roots. And what do the roots do? They take They take up the nutrients, right? They're also anchorage in water. Going all the way back to the very beginning. Good job. Right. If we don't have any roots, we don't have any nutrients. And if we don't have any nutrients, we don't have a crop. Right? So it's important to understand that like there's a below ground world that is going on that really kind of dictates on whether or not our crop is successful. Some of those plant diseases are soil borne. They eat the roots. And if we don't have any roots, we don't have a crop. Or we have to spray some fungicide. So understanding kind of that there are also these things going on. There are some things that we can do, some being chemical, we spray pesticides. It's also possible to have biological controls, that we can release some other beneficial insects or pests or microorganisms into the soil that basically fight against those pathogens. And we'll see that in the end. Not only are they breaking down our plant material, but they're also decomposing some of those organic pesticides and chemicals that we're putting into the soil. Just through natural, we need to spray Roundup on our crops to keep the weeds down, or whatever it is. There may be some contamination. And so one of the things that these microbes can do is bioremediation. And I know y'all might not know much about DDT, your grandparents might, but I know y'all heard of TNT. And so when that explodes, there is the chemical's still there. And so these microbes, through bioremediation, are able to break down that TNT into less toxic compounds that can then be broken further down. And now so we don't have a problem. And so bioremediation will look more on the side of environmental sciences or maybe sustainability or how to clean up water. Bioremediation, you can add microbes to water systems. Those microbes specifically attack those compounds and change the structure into a into a more benign form. Again, going back to the last module, composting, or those residues have to be cut or broken down, decomposed. We rely on our microbes to do that, or our macrofauna, ants, and I mean, they're breaking something down, termites, breaking down wood, things of that nature. And how this might come into play is that if you know that there are going to, so when we try to work with biodegradable, I don't know, I guess the easiest thing that I could think of are like egg crates. And so I went on a trip to Knoxville 4 or 5 years ago, it seems, forever ago. And what they were doing is they were making these biodegradable egg crates, like egg cartons, that they were then, you know, using for the eggs and whatnot. But when they were done, you could use them to plant little plants, put them in the ground. The egg carton degraded, and then the plant was left there. So like, there's all these multiple uses. What they did is they said, oh, you know what? These microbes that are ubiquitous, if you ever see that word again, ubiquitous means everywhere. If they know what the microbial populations are, they can start to make these materials that the microbes can break down easier, rather than just plastic. We need those microbes in sewage treatment, septic tanks. That's what cleans those. That's what cleans that water, because there's nothing else down there except for this dark tank that may or may not have oxygen in it, and that's what decomposes our wastes. Everyone good on the slide? I saw a few people still writing. Okay. So a couple of things to understand when we're talking about the soil environment. One is going to be ecology. Which is part of an ecosystem. Kind of like going from a cell to a tissue to an organ to a body. Similar to that. Can't have one without the other. So if we have an abundance of those microorganisms, letting them do their thing without influencing any, without having any anthropogenic input, man-made input, they're a self-sustaining community. And the environment that surrounds them is thriving as well. But once humans introduce some management practice, there's the potential to influence the ecology of the ecosystem. When I think about things like this, the term that comes to mind is biodiversity. And that if you have a monoculture of just corn, you don't have a very biodiverse system. That ecosystem is vulnerable. It cannot buffer against some drastic change. A pest comes in, eats your whole crop, you're screwed. So we need to have this biodiversity, or a soil-borne pathogen happens to get dropped on your crop or something like that, boom, and eats all the roots. You get a nematode infestation. If there's not enough of those other organisms to combat that, you're lost. And I think we're all kind of aware of what this kind of terminology of health is. And I think that's something that y'all will be facing and hearing a lot of as you continue to move forward in your careers. And so health is this, it's about resilience. You might hear some things like regenerative agriculture, sustainability, things of that nature. Soil health, soil quality is what we're going to end on. Health is related to function. Does it function properly? Are there gaps? And there was I heard something or saw something on Facebook, and this might be digressing a little bit, but I just want you to think about something in terms of how we define healthy. A psychiatrist or someone was walking through a restaurant and saw a mom with a family with 3 or 4 kids that were just going absolutely nuts, right? Anybody have brothers and sisters? Household's a mess, isn't it? It's always fighting. There's always something going on. And the mom's over here going, oh my God, I can't believe it. My kids they're unruly. I can't keep up with them. And the psychiatrist walked over to the mom and said, no, actually what they have is a very healthy childhood. They're free to express themselves. They don't have to worry about walking on eggshells. They know that they can come to you if they have something. So actually, you're doing what's best for them. And the mom was like, I never thought about it like that. So health might have a different concept, especially when you think about soil health, than what you might expect. But just when I heard that, I thought, that makes sense. That's more of a healthy relationship with their family, that the kids are free enough to express themselves. Much like the same thing in soil, that there's enough movement and there's enough cycling that those processes are going that something is not stifled or suppressed or not working properly. You know, like if you have a kid that isn't opening up, something's wrong there. If you have a soil that's not producing, something is wrong there. We need to address that. How do we fix it? So as you move forward in your careers, be open to what is considered healthy and what isn't. And that's not only in soil, or that's in everything that you do. That's my little life tidbit to put in there. That healthy is going to be redefined. And it's not what we used to think that it was. So just kind of be open-minded to the definition and the thought processes behind health, whether it be soils, personal relationships, anything that you can think of when you think about health, a little bit different than what you might typically consider stereotypical. So in this soil and plant continuum, there has to be this exchange. Remember I talked about that plants are taking in carbon dioxide. They go through photosynthesis. The soil is classed by the plant class, but it is the basis of it. And so we are removing this carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, giving off oxygen. Remember I mentioned that plant science at a very most basic level, that we pull in carbon dioxide, give off oxygen. As we move forward in our careers and as we move forward towards 2050 and trying to figure out how we can mitigate climate change, or how we can, there's going to be these things with carbon credits. I'm going to go over that kind of as we leave out of this class. But we're sequestering carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, right? That's what plants do. And if we can keep that in the soil, not go back into the atmosphere, we have the potential to not contribute to global warming or climate change, or however you want to hear that. But if we don't do anything about it, if we're not part of the solution, we might be part of the problem. Kind of how I see that. Detritus is going to be those remains. It's going to be what's left over from those microorganisms and macroorganisms doing their thing. It contributes to the organic matter. I think we consider organic matter being like plants, but there are also animals that die too. They go from range from a dead bee to a possum on the side of the road. Vultures are carrying microbes to that. There was one example that I had. We were walking through a field, and one of my colleagues said, "What happened here?" There was a darker spot about the color of Jacob's shirt, his hoodie, in the middle of this like light green kind of field. It was odd. There was a spot there that was kind of like, how'd that get there? It turns out that some animal had probably died there, as the microbes and as birds and ants and buzzards and everything kind of ate on that and kind of decomposed it. They left those, they recycled that nitrogen into the soil, and that's why the grass was greener. And so that's kind of this plant and animal remains. When we think about soil fauna, we're thinking about the animals. These are the heterotrophs. These are the things that need to hunt and eat something other than carbon dioxide. Plants are autotrophs, right? Carbon dioxide in with light. They don't need to scavenge or hunt or gather their food. They don't have to put any energy into receiving substance. And then our microflora is going to be our microbes and our biomass. And so both of these two things together, because if a deer dies, it would take just the soil microbes forever to completely kind of decompose that deer. So remember we talked about the humic acid and the fulvic acid and the humus. And the humus being the unidentifiable part. You don't know what it is. Even if you did a chemical analysis, it still wouldn't tell you anything. But what that's important for is it holds on to those nutrients that are necessary for plant life to continue to grow. And as long as we aren't requiring the plant to grow more than it's supposed to, like corn, it's not like we really have to fertilize trees very much. There's enough material and nutrients in the soil close to those roots that it's sustainable. But when we try to force something to grow faster than it needs to, that's where we start messing up. What's that? What? You're forcing it to grow faster than it should.
No.
Right, so there are several different, what he was saying is you can burn the plant material to put the nutrients back in there. So there are two types of, metabolism, respiration. There are two types of organisms, one being obligate, and the other being facultative. Have y'all heard these terms before? Maybe from way back in high school biology class. Obligate means that humans are obligate. We require oxygen in order to breathe. If you put me in water, I die. I do not have the ability to breathe underwater yet. I still keep trying to practice this every time I take a drink, and I believe that I can breathe and drink at the same time. It still has not worked in the 42 years that I've been doing this thing. So I am obligate. I require oxygen in order to breathe. Most organisms that are aerobic require oxygen in order to continue this process. We talked about this in the last module with oxidation, metabolism, photosynthesis, things like that. And then we have anaerobic, which means fish. Well, I guess fish wouldn't be anaerobic. She's looking at me, she's like, no, I don't say that. Because they take the oxygen out of the soil, even though we don't think of, out of the water. Even though we don't think of water as being aerobic. But anaerobic means a complete absence of oxygen, like maybe a septic system or a wetland. I showed my soil chemistry class this concept of the great oxygenation event. Anybody ever heard of that? No? Long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Most of the Earth's environment was filled with methane and sulfur oxides. It was a very reduced environment. There's not a lot of oxygen. And so most of the microbes that were there were anaerobic. They were obligated to anaerobic conditions. Well, cyanobacteria were photosynthetic, and the principle of photosynthesis is to pull in some carbon source and give off some oxygen source. Eventually, the cyanobacteria gave off enough oxygen that it completely changed the Earth's environment to now oxygenated, and all the anaerobic microbes died. It just completely wiped out pretty much every microbe that was on the face of the Earth except for this cyanobacteria. but then it also took away all the carbon too, so they almost died because they changed the environment. Now there's no carbon to take from. So it just all depends. Those anaerobic bacteria were obligated to low oxygen environments. And then there are facultative, and these are the ones that can do both. They are not required to only have oxygen. If the oxygen gets taken up, well, they're still able to perform maybe at a reduced capacity, because remember we talked about the aerobic respiration much greater than anaerobic respiration, but that the process is still happening. So there are two types of microorganisms: obligate, whether it be with or without oxygen, or facultative, meaning that they can survive in either environment. That's the long and the short of that. So we have autotrophs, and they get their carbon from that carbon dioxide. So plants being autotrophic. And then, of course, just because we can't live, very simple, plants and that cyanobacteria that I was talking about, those are photoautotrophs, meaning that they need light in order to convert that carbon, in order to go through the process of photosynthesis, in order to extract that carbon out to make a sugar. There are some chemo autotrophs, and I'm pretty sure that if we were in a microbiology class, they would go into that more in depth. But just to understand that there are bacteria that require carbon dioxide and light in order to get their energy, and there are some that can get their energy from chemicals that are in the soil. Well, if the plant material didn't decompose and release the nutrients, those chemo autotrophs don't get the energy. And then finally, there are heterotrophs, and that's us. We cannot make our own food. We have to eat. We have to go to Chick-fil-A, or we need to ingest some sort of material so that we can continue to function. Some carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Those are the three things that humans need the most of. Probably less on the carbohydrate and fat part. And I think this is where we are going to end. Y'all have a good day. It's beautiful outside. Catch some fresh air. Yeah, we're out. I'm just leaving it up there for some people to get.